Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
So today, is the 31st day of October 2023, and we will be looking at the legal regime for host communities. Legal regime for host communities. Or legal regime for host communities development. You can look up. In previous classes, we had tried to look at the legal framework for ownership of oil and gas resources. We emphasized the fact that apart from the United States of America and perhaps a few states in Canada, the norm is that all over the globe, all over the world, petroleum is centrally owned, centrally managed, and what states provide for is derivation. And so the region from whence the petroleum is extracted would usually be entitled to something over and above what the rest of the regions in that particular country will be entitled to. That is for federal systems. In unitary systems, like in the United Kingdom and Norway, where they don't have a federation but they have a unitary system, there is even no provision for derivation. Rather, the regions from whence those petroleum, where the petroleum is extracted, will stand to benefit more in terms of contracting, in terms of housing, because they own the land, and engagement. So, for example, Aberdeen in the United Kingdom, somewhere in Scotland, is the hub for the oil and gas industry in that country. And even though the United Kingdom doesn't provide for derivation, Aberdeen still stands to benefit reasonably when you compare it with other regions of that country. But for most federal systems, what you see is derivation. And moving on from there, we try to emphasize that for the Niger Delta, for Nigeria, the 1960 Constitution and the 63 Constitution had provided a revenue sharing formula based on principles such as needs, land mass, and population, and then derivation. And for derivation, we emphasized the fact that 50% was provided for the regions, petroleum, not just petroleum, but mineral resources, natural resources extracted from the environment. 50% was to be sent back to those regions, and then 20% was to be paid to the federal government, and 30% was to be shared among all the states, including those, the region, not states in this case, including the eastern region from whence, or any region from whence the petroleum or the mineral resources had already been extracted. So in addition to the 50% you get for being the owner of the natural resources, you still had the entitlement to share in the other 30% as well. And we also emphasized that there was no offshore-onshore dichotomy, which was a very, very agreeable understanding, but that in 1966 there was a military coup that overthrew the civilian administration, and then the military began to rule by decrees, and among other things they suspended parts of the 1963 Constitution, one of which was Section 140, which had provided for derivation. Going on from there, we also looked at the progressive deprivation of the Niger Delta region through the issuance of decrees, one of which was the 1971 onshore and offshore and decree, essentially, which offshore oil revenues decree also of 1971, which essentially stood to create an onshore-offshore dichotomy, the essence of which was that all petroleum derived offshore was sent straight to Lagos, now it's Abuja, rather than to the regions. So the regions did not have the right to benefit from any form of derivation, because it was deemed that petroleum offshore was not part of those littoral regions. And then we looked at the incremental reduction of derivation. We looked at the incremental deprivation of the Niger Delta region by the reduction of derivation and we emphasized that the 1979 Constitution did not even provide for derivation, and then we pointed out that in 1992 there was some attempts to increase derivation to 3% and to abolish the onshore-offshore dichotomy as well. But when we returned to civilian rule in 1999, there was no mention of onshore-offshore dichotomy. Rather, Section 162 of that Constitution provided for some form of derivation, minimum of which is what percentage, sir?
13%.
Excellent, 13%. And then that is attendance. That has been the situation, and at the time there was some disagreement. The federal government took the states to court, 2001, and then the Supreme Court upheld the contention of the federal government that indeed there was no onshore, offshore. Indeed there was an offshore-onshore dichotomy, which according to them was valid based on common law and international law. We also pointed out that the outcome of that decision was to disentitle the Niger Delta state from participating in every petroleum that is extracted offshore, and particularly it was Cross River State, whose petroleum. Okay, I hope you signed just one.
Yes.
Okay.
Already not to the line of substance.
It's okay. It's okay. So we pointed out that that was the position. So Cross River was particularly hit because most of its petroleum, so-called, have been located offshore, and so to perhaps assuage their concern, in 2004 there was an onshore-offshore dichotomy act which tried to, provide some compensation, but it was not extensive enough to completely abolish that dichotomy. So I'm doing this by way of background. I love giving background in order to be able to move on to where we are. So since then, the federal government of Nigeria, now the host communities, or what, let me not say the host communities, the Niger Delta region in general has had issues. Okay, any issue, please, let me focus on my class. I'm a bit distracted. Have you signed?
I'm trying to.
Okay. So the Niger Delta region we've had these issues for long, feelings of deprivation, feelings of marginalization, perceived or real, have been there for so many decades now. The region suffers from environmental degradation, which we're all aware of, extreme poverty, depletion of the land and the fishing resources of the people by the continuous petroleum extraction by oil companies, and then there's also violence meted out to the people when they try to assert themselves, sometimes even through peaceful means. The classic example was in a hanging of Ken Saro-Wiwa on the 10th of November 1995 with some other environmentalists and agitators in Ogoni land were brutally hanged by the federal military government of that era. So when Nigeria eventually returned to civilian rule in 1999, at least there was some space for people to contend again and to clamor for some form of resource control. Thus far, to assuage the concerns of the people, certain initiatives have been put forward, one of which is the establishment of the NDDC. The sad thing is that NDDC is manned by Niger Deltans. So if this establishment was set up to address our problem, then we should have been able to reap the benefit. But we all know that it has become the hub for corruption. It is, of course, the hub for corruption. So the truth is that even if you give Niger Delta people give them 100%, we will still be poor, because it's a spiritual, it's a mindset problem, it's a corrupt problem. So we set up this NDDC, and then huge sums of funds were given to them. As is often the case, the political elite hijack the entity and then use it as a system of patronage. So NDDC becomes a system of political patronage, bogus contracts, and all that. It was so bad that around 2005, 2006, there was a chairman of NDC then, I've forgotten his name, a man from Akwa Ibom. He had a problem. He was the chairman, and he had a problem with the managing director then, Timi Alaibe, and he wanted to kill him. So he got somebody to invoke some causes. And among the terms of the engagement was that he was to burn, you heard of that story? You have not forgotten. He was to burn 300 million naira. So he took 300 million naira to a cemetery. He was to burn it naked. And then after everything he did, the man that he wanted to kill did not die. The man was waxing stronger. And then he went after the native doctor. The native doctor, incidentally, is an Ijoman from Delta State. It was all in the news. Mm-hmm. Yes, so he went after that man, and that was how the thing got blown up. That was around 2007. So Yar'Adua had to suspend him and all that. So despite the fact that we had the NDDC, we did not see any meaningful results. Again, we had 13%, like I pointed out last time. And what the Niger Delta states have received from 1999 till now runs into billions of dollars. Nothing again to show for it, nothing significant. Perhaps Akwa Ibom State and the River State can point to one or two infrastructural and leaps or achievements, but largely speaking, the Niger Delta states remain very poor. Classic model is Bayelsa State, Delta State, and most of the region is extremely poor and all that. So NDDC failed. Then there was the issue of the 13% derivation has also failed. Then they set up the Niger Delta Ministry. That entity doesn't have so much funding. But again, we have not seen any serious results. So that is where we are. But today our focus is with respect to the community. So you have to draw, look at the Niger Delta question, you have to draw two distinctions. First of all, the oil-bearing communities, and then the oil-bearing states. You know, the oil-bearing communities reasonably or naturally ought to benefit more because the petroleum is extracted directly from their state where, get out of my class, why are you coming now?
Oh, sorry sir, I went to see Mr. Venables, I'm sorry sir.
You are Mr. So you have a class and you're going to see somebody?
No, I didn't know you were here sir. I was sitting outside. I didn't know.
Enter. Now your age and just the look that you are a very young girl, so I'm just accommodating you. I believe that by the time we get to year 5, you would have grown. Let's continue. So the issue is communities. For the states, the federal government has at least tried to say we have increased derivation from 3% in 1992 to 13. Nothing to show for it. But more importantly, what about the regions, the states? I mean, the communities in these states where the petroleum is taken from, they suffer more, you know, from pollution, gas flaring. So I may come from a community that doesn't have oil in Bayelsa. I will not suffer so much of the environmental degradation and the erosion of my land, destruction of my creeks, swamps, all those economic crops and all that. I won't suffer. You know, but you are suffering. But the money that is brought to the state is managed centrally by the state governor. And he may, particularly in these days of political vindictiveness, if that particular region where the oil is extracted from is not in his political party or did not support him, he can starve them of the benefits of even the 13% for the next 8 years. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
So there has been this clamor that there should be some form of decentralization of the benefits accruing from petroleum revenues to the host communities. The 1960 Constitution did not envisage that because the idea was that governors were going to be just, and 63 did not. All the initiatives that were put forward up to 1999 did not. But when the PIB of 2004 was now being drawn, we now began to hear about host communities. They started agitating for a direct form of compensation. And so in 2012, the PIB 2012, for the first time now provided that oil companies were to give 10% of their annual spend in the previous year to the community from whence they operate in particular. Of course, the oil companies resisted that. and that law was not enacted until we now have the PIA 2021. I said all of that to give you what background, because we want to jump in. Before the enactment of this PIA, the oil companies, in line with what we call corporate social responsibility, began to enter into certain agreements with those communities. Not all of them, but a number of them. What is it called, sir?
GME.
Excellent.
Global Development Fund.
Excellent. So they began to enter into these communities, into this agreement with communities. They will put a few communities into a cluster. Is that so?
Yes, sir.
Have you been involved in it?
Yes, sir.
In any way?
Yes.
Please come and share your experience with us. Come forward. Let the video capture you. This is Mr. Abaka. Abaka what?
Abaka.
Abaka what, sir?
Abaka Owizide.
Okay, Abaka Owizide is an Ijoban. From which community?
Southern Osun, Izetu community.
Okay, Izetu, stand there now because your face will be going to YouTube. Okay, over to you. Explain, give us your experience. What was it about?
From I think basically from my area it started 2005 when Jonathan was the governor of the state.
A bit louder.
Jonathan was the governor of the state.
Yes.
When Chevron, who are the operators of Pennyton, Agbami and Bunga field,
Yes.
then clustered the 8 communities. Number 1, number 2, Freestyle, Sagana, Izetu 1, Izetu 2, Ekini and Fropa, 8 communities as cluster community, and call them KEFES. They call them KEFES. We are the River Foundation.
Okay.
And that foundation was established by Chevron, and that they are going to fund the foundation annually. So I think when they started, about 100 million naira was given to them. The basic intention of them is giving this money to the community, so the community will bring elected members to that board.
Okay.
I think this community is 4 members, comprising 32 members. Out of the 32 members, they have a chairman that is going to manage the 100 million naira. So they will now sit down and look, okay, this year, this 100 million, what should we do with this 100 million? They will now look at the community, okay, community 1, 2, 3, we are going to this. We are going to do project for this community this year. Then the subsequent year we are going to do project for that community. And that was how they managed the process up to now, till date.
Okay.
Till date. Now currently what is happening is, because as a result of the PIA,
Yes, yes.
I think they managed it to 2016,
Okay.
where Chevron sold one of the assets to one other company.
Okay.
First CMP, First Exploration and Production Company.
Okay.
So they also came and Chevron told them that this is the platform we are meeting with.
Yes.
Come and join the platform they are meeting. So at that point, now those 2 companies come together. Chevron was funding their own side. Then the first CMP2 was funding their own side for the 8 communities. Basically, the idea is they strongly believe that if the community members are in charge and the money has been given to the community, the rest,
Yes.
they are going to do the project that the community needed most.
Okay.
And that is a concept.
Okay. Has there been peace? Was it peacefully and frugally managed among the communities?
To a large extent, there was peace.
Okay.
I know the drug factor
Yes.
recently come to play.
Okay.
And some of the big boys, the processor generated a lot of big boys.
Yes.
And some of them who become very wealthy in the process refuse to leave the system for others to operate. And that is the challenge the system has. But it's a very good system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baka, for you can sit down for sharing your experience with us. Berezidia, do you have something to add?
No, I don't have.
Okay. I thank you for your eloquence. I know you are seriously involved in this thing and you have that interest, which is a great one. Okay, so GMOUs. Not all companies did it because there was no mandate by law for a company to set up a GMOU. There was no law. The idea is that a corporate social responsibility is a moral obligation imposed upon companies. And in order to acquire what we refer to as a social license, let me be seeing my daughter Vicky. Move. Let me be seeing your black in your face. Sit down there. Good. Whenever I see you, I remember myself. Good girl. So you need a social license to operate. President, are you with me? Now you have got the legal license from the government in Abuja. That one is your own. the people also have to give you license. That license from the people is what we call the social work license. They can't take it to any court, but you need them to cooperate with you. You need their goodwill. You need peace so that your staff can operate well. Your staff can go into the community to buy themselves food to eat. They can relate well with the people. That social license can only come when you begin to implement corporate social responsibility initiatives, cottage hospitals, little roads, borehole. If there is a flood, you provide relief material, scholarships. Are you with me? Every community, every company is expected to do that. And so for a few companies, the approach they use was this GMOE. Shell is also one of them. Ajib did not. Shell and the company just called Chevron, a number of them also went to the GMOU. Like I said, they set up a cluster board. And they can, like for Shell, normally 4 years. The board will operate for like 4 years, and then we'll do a new election and all that. While Ajib did not do that, they still implemented several CSRO initiatives also, particularly in the brass area. They give them a lot of employment, give them a lot of small contracts. So if you go to Nembe, go to brass, a lot of those people have connection with Ajib. Are you with me? Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
Good people. But it was felt that as the PIA was coming on stream, we should move from CSRO initiatives to make it mandatory. Hence, the PIA now has now provided for the establishment of a host community development trust. And that is where we are today. Want to look at it, sections 234 to 257. 234 to 257 provides for the establishment of a host community trust and the legal framework for managing it, administering it, funding it, and all that. So we start with the objective. What is the objective of the trust itself? You see that in section 234 of the Act. I will run through them. The objectives of chapter 3, one of them is to foster sustainable prosperity. You don't need to write, I'll send you my slide if you're interested. You are interested?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so number one is to foster sustainable prosperity. 2, to provide social and economic benefits from petroleum operations. 3, to advance peaceful and harmonious coexistence between concessionaires and their hosts. And 4, to create a framework for the support of the development of host communities. So if I love you so much in the exam, I can set a straightforward question. What are the objectives of chapter 3, the host community trust? You should be able to just give me that. And then I may ask you how many clauses can you find in a production sharing contract. You should be able to tell me and all that. So basically, the Act provides, set up a host community trust, and then we want to now look at the framework. The interesting thing is that when we're talking about host community trust now, it's not just mandated to upstream companies. You can hear me talk about concessionaire set law. It's not just upstream. Even the downstream or midstream company is now also mandated to set up a host community trust. So Azikel Refinery that is operating in East Barra area is also mandated to set up a host community trust. Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
Good. So the obligation is incorporate this host, section 235 basically deals with the obligations. Incorporate the host community development trust, what I call HCDT, for the benefit of host communities for which these companies are now to be responsible. The company that establishes the trust is called the SETLOR. SETTLOR. SETTLOR. And where there is a collectivity of settlers operating under a JOA, 4 or 5 companies have a concession under a JV, joint venture arrangement, and they're operating under a JOA. It is the operator that will be saddled with the responsibility to establish this trust and to manage it. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so for example, we have Shell, NNPC and Ajib, they can have a JV one company will be operate it. That operator has this responsibility. And another thing I want to point out at this level is that in setting up this trust, the Act has removed again the onshore-offshore dichotomy. I pointed it out. I still want to emphasize it because I may ask you in the exam. After the decision, following the decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Attorney General of the Federation, was Attorney General of Abia and 35 others, what initiatives have been put forward to assuage the concerns of the Niger Delta people? You should be able to tell me first of all, the 2004 Act that abolished onshore-offshore dichotomy as far as 200-meter depth is concerned. 200-meter depth is concerned, and point out that Act did not go as far as the original provision in 1960 and 1963. 1960-1963 says anything you collect from the territorial sea, exclusive economic zone, continental shelf, contiguous zone, it is deemed to be a part of the eastern region, or it was deemed to be a part of the eastern region, of course, of which Bayelsa and River State and Akwa Ibom were a part of. But this 2004 Act only tried to capture the concerns of some few states, one of which is Cross River, by saying that there will be no onshore-offshore dichotomy for up to a 200-meter depth. Another innovation in this regard is what we are now looking at. Section 235 is now providing that in helping in developing those communities, we will not create that dichotomy. We will not recognize it. And so for host community issue, if the petroleum is collected from the exclusive economic zone, continental shelf, IC, wherever, the contiguous state to that zone, from that maritime zone where the petroleum is extracted, will be deemed to be part of that. Are you with me? Will be deemed to be part of that exclusive economic zone or continental shelf for purpose only of them benefiting from this host community trusts. Okay. Yeah, so for companies operating in shallow water and deep waters, the littoral communities and any other community determined by the said law are to be regarded as part of the host communities. Okay, let's move on. So now what are the obligations? What did the Act say? The Act first of all now mandates the set law. The operator or the oil company in question, like I said, it could be an upstream concessionaire or downstream or midstream operator, but usually we'll be looking at the focus definitely is upstream concessionaires. Are you with me? Yes. Are you with me?
Yes.
Then we could drop down a bit to midstream operators as well. So first of all, appoint a board of trustees. Appoint a board of trustees. That's the first thing they have to do in consultation with the host communities. Because I told you that a concession that can be granted to one company can straddle 4 or 5 communities. The concession can be very wide. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
And so all those communities, like for example, where I come from now, Kayama, in fact my whole family, Subai family, we have oil in our land. But Opokuma, a neighboring community, are also part of what, are you with me? So that concession covers Opokuma, also covers Kayama. So anything the company is doing, they say they are giving contracts, so job they'll give Opokuma one family, and it's not everybody Opokuma, it could be the particular family. Are you with me? Are you with me?
Yes.
It could be Perezide family, Owezide family, and Subai family in Kayama, it could be another family from Sampo. Would have those lands, you all now come together and then begin to dictate things. So first of all, appoint a board of trustees in consultation with host communities, and then this board of trustees will now approach the Corporate Affairs Commission, CAC, and incorporate the trust. So you are setting up a trust, and overseeing this trust will be a board of trustees. This board will now approach the Corporate Affairs Commission, and the Corporate Affairs Commission will now incorporate the association. It will act, what is actually incorporated, the trustees. So you say the incorporated trustees of is a two host community development trust. Are you with me? Yes, or the incorporated trustees or registered trustees of Peremabri Host Community Development Trust, or Peremabri and Ekowe and maybe one other related community Host Community Development Trust. Everyone that is incorporated must end with the word Host Community Development Trust. That is what the law provides. Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
After you have done that, the next thing you want to do is to now, the company is now to do what they call a needs assessment. A needs assessment. What are the needs of these particular communities? Their problem here is water. We don't have problem with water. Our own is flooding. We need to pile up our shores. Is that not so? Yes, so some communities, that's their problem, piling. Others is that they want to farm, but they need irrigation system. Whatever the problem is, you undertake a comprehensive needs assessment. Again, you can't do that without conferring with the people you want to help. That will be arrogance. So after you have done a lot of consultation and engagement, you will now set up, you will now know their needs, then you will now draw up a plan, host community development plan. So first of all, you know the need, and then the assessment will metamorphose to a community development plan for the purpose of determining the projects to be undertaken by the trust. It makes sense, does it not?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now the trust, in order to ensure that we don't have unusual delay, must be set up within a defined time frame, section 236. Set up the trust within a defined time frame. For existing OMLs, it must be set up within 12 months after the PIA is enacted, which we use the word effective date. Effective date. 12 months after the enactment of PIA, or what we call the effective date, set it up. For what we call designated facilities, these are mainly midstream operations. For designated facilities, set it up within 12 months after the effective date or the enactment of the PIA. What are designated facilities? Petroleum terminals, crude oil and natural gas transportation pipelines, bulk storage tank farms, refineries and gas processing plants in midstream petroleum operations and petrochemical plants. So these are designated facilities. Are you with me so far? A company that has any of these facilities must also set up its trust within 12 months. For companies that are applying for the approval of their field development plans, they must set up the trust before they even apply to the upstream commission. You must set up the trust. That's what the law says, section 236. For existing OPLs or PMLs or PPLs, set up the trust prior to making the application for a field development plan. Can we continue, please?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's say a few things. From time to time, we looked at concessions that will be granted in Chapter 2 of the Act, and we said that it's possible that a person may assign his concession with the minister's consent. Is that so? Yes, or novate it. Novation is basically an agreement, a renegotiation of an agreement that may totally change the face of that agreement, that essentially looks like you have transferred it, or you may transfer your concession. In either of these cases, if you're either novating, transferring, or assigning your concession, the man you are assigning it to, what we call the assignee or the transferee, is the one that will take over your obligation. So if I already have an host community obligation to use to, and I'm now novating or transferring or assigning my concession to Mr. Onos Nigeria Limited, he takes over my obligations. I'm free. Is that okay?
Yes.
But if I am surrendering my concession for surrender, if I'm surrendering my concession, you know, what is the difference between surrender and relinquishment, Halima?
Okay. Relinquishment it's basically in the instance of when a concession is granted now, like a PMS is granted for a period of 20 years. At the end of the 10-year period, you have to relinquish half of your concession back to the federal government. And surrender is in the instance of, okay, maybe you feel that you don't have enough hands, and then you know that you cannot handle everything. Before it is forcefully relinquished from you, that you have to give back, that you then surrender it.
Okay. You have an idea, thank you. But maybe put it better for her. Our black hijab queen. put it better for her.
For relinquishment, it's more or less of an involuntary action where the law prescribes for you to relinquish part of your concession. If it's an OML, part of your concession where 10 years of your lease has gone by, or if it's in terms of a PPL, an area that is not an appraisal area or a retention area, you are to relinquish where there is no where there is no commercial discovery of either gas or oil. And for surrender, it is more or less of a voluntary action where you see that you're not in use of a part of your concession, so you surrender it back to the government.
Okay, thank you. You want to add something? Okay, thank you very much. So please note the law of relinquishment. Alima, you said something. When we move over to the PPL, the PIA regime, I pointed out that there's a slight distinction from the previous provision. The previous provision is that after 10 years, you must relinquish half. Now, after 10 years, you must relinquish half of the concessions that are not producing. You must relinquish all part of your concession, not even half, all part of your concession area that is not producing. And so I told us that the idea is to motivate you to develop your concession and then take advantage of the time, not sleep on that. And we also pointed out that when a company decides to convert from OML to PML, you know, the law of conversion, one of the things is that you must be able to relinquish how many percentage? Excellent. You are my student. Anywhere you go, they tell you who teach because call my name. You dey hear me?
Yes, sir.
Call my name, say nah, I want to join my name na Perowe Subai. If you don't know the course and they ask you who taught you, don't call my name. Say it's one is German, but I've forgotten his name. He be black where he used to wear glass, but I will remember his name after. Oh, thank you, Lord. Okay, so let's come back. But you're all trying. It's small. Even me that is teaching, it's not once you get it, you keep developing. So you guys are trying. It's just I want you to be the best. I was talking with one of my students 2 days ago. In fact, actually, she stayed in my house for 1 month in Port Harcourt. She was attending a program and in a law firm, an internship arrangement. And she was telling me, you know, the company they're into oil and gas. So the things she learned here, they were so helpful. You know, so I want you to really have a grasp. I was also talking with one of my daughters. She's in final year now. And she had something to do somewhere, and when she was opened her mouth to talk oil and gas, wow, who taught you? You can say it's Perowe. It's Perowe Super. You know, so please, you guys should try. Okay, so we are back again. So for a company that surrenders, so surrender basically, I'm not doing again, and the problem is too much. Obia poor boys are seizing all my back. In fact, you can surrender for any reason. You don't need to give any reason. Notify the minister. But we told you that when you surrender, it is without prejudice to pre-existing obligations. Did we say that? Yes. So the obligation for a company in this case is actually an annual obligation. I've set up a trust, and the law says every year conferred 3%. So if I surrender my concession to the federal government now, the federal government now say, okay, you have surrendered, good, let's give it to Vicky Nigeria Limited. And when they give it to her, my obligation to that community is what is surviving. It survives my surrender. My obligation to the community survives my surrender. So I don't come on hand for the concession, but the obligation I have to the two community survives. But that survival is for just 1 year, because definitely the next year I will not be in operation. Is that not so? And the law says it is only the 3% of your spend for 2022. So if in 2022 I spent 100 naira to develop my concession, 3 naira of that 100 naira I'm supposed to give to the two community. Now I'm to give it to them. I say, sorry, you have surrendered my concession to the government. That is without prejudice to that pre-existing obligation. That's what we're saying. President, is it okay? Yes. Good. So for surrender, the former concessionaire will continue to discharge the surviving obligation, notwithstanding that the area is surrendered The area that is surrendered may be granted to a new lessee or licensee. For revocation, the government may say you are not complying with any of our laws. You know the law on revocation, section 95, section 96. We revoke or we terminate. Termination is that I am the one terminating. Is that also? Or time has expired. Either party can terminate and all that. So if there's revocation or termination or expiration, then the holder will also continue to discharge its surviving obligations, notwithstanding that the area revoked, terminated, or expired may also be granted to a new concessionaire. So I felt you should know that. And now, basically, that. So let's now look at the objectives of the trust. What is the objective of the trust that we are setting up? Number one is to finance and execute projects for the benefit of sustainable development, or finance and execute projects for the sustainable development of that community. Two, for infrastructural development, the facilitation of economic empowerment opportunities, the advancement and propagation of educational development, healthcare support, and the support of local initiatives aimed at enhancing environmental protection, and providing support for local initiatives which enhance security and assist in the developmental purposes that are beneficial to those communities. And okay, so basically these are the objectives of the trust. Just to point out that the establishment of the trust fund will not necessarily disentitle those communities from any other entitlement under the law. So you cannot say because you are benefiting from 3% host community. If we have a law called, we have a fund called the Ecological Fund. You are aware of that? Are you aware of that? Ecological Fund. So it's a fund where I think states and federal governments are meant to be sending some amount of money to address environmental concerns. Those states and some parts of Igbo land have suffered a lot from erosion, wind erosion. If you go there, you see gullies. The Ecological Fund is meant to address those challenges. My mother's community, Agbere, is almost eaten into two because of this erosion. I don't know if any other person has experienced that in any other Ijaw community.
Yeah.
You have that too. So we keep the community. When I was small, where I was small, the places we used to play when we were small now have now become part of the river. And so we may decide to use funds from the Ecological Fund to address that. You will not say, okay, because you are benefiting from host community, you will not partake of that. That is what section 239 basically is saying. Okay, so let's say a few things about the trust. Just a minute.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, brother.
How do we assess the ecological fund?
You complain now. You complain to the government. I don't even understand.
State government.
I don't know so much about it. Maybe you talk to my colleague. My colleague is teaching environmental law, but I want to believe that if there's a problem, there will be channels for complaints. Do you understand?
Yes.
And the board will not look the way I have money. But again, and when you go there and you go and find out that people are stealing, stealing the money, everywhere people are stealing. Just I don't know what is wrong with us. Our values are so eroded. Everything we judge, everything we assess is from monetary perspective, and that is why we are where we are. This man is doing well. What is he doing well? Is that he has money. I don't judge like that. You have all the money, you don't have values. I was talking with somebody yesterday. He was telling me of his daughter has divorced, the husband has divorced, and the man was sleeping with the house girl. Your wife, or you have a wife, when she go to work, you'll be sleeping with the house girl. Now the marriage is, he has money, and maybe she married him because of money. But now he's sleeping with the house girl. Eventually the marriage has broken. So no values. So we need to come back. And God will help us in Jesus' name. Let's come back again to host community. Today everybody wants to relocate to Canada. They are not going to Canada to improve the country. It's just to go there and make money. Nigerians go abroad. They don't go to do work that will better the lives of those people. When they go there, it's money. So they're involved in fraud, 419, Yahoo, all those, drugs, is it not so? Bad things. Why? Because of values. Because when you come back, you are celebrated not because of the value that you have added to community, you are celebrated because of the money you have. Okay. But I'm not part of it. I've never been. I will never be. Sorry. Are there questions? Victory?
No, sir.
Okay, so I've talked about misassessment. Okay, yes, I've talked about objective. So now let's say something about the fund again. You know, so I just to still go back, section 240, set laws are to establish trust fund that to contribute an amount equal to 3% of the operating expenditure in the immediately preceding calendar year for the operations affecting the host community in question. The trust may also receive donations, gifts, or honoraria, as well as profits and interest accruing to the reserve fund to be established for the community. So essentially, the law says, for what you did last year, like I said, you use 100 naira to operate all the expenses you made, the employees you employed, the equipment you bought, the land matters you settled, the acquisition, all your expenditure, take 3% and commit it to that particular community or that group of communities or the group of communities affected by your operations. Are you with me? Of that 3% now, you have to divide it into 3. There will be a capital fund. To that capital fund, you will dedicate 70%. There will be a reserve fund where you dedicate 20%. That's making it 90. Is that 90?
Yes.
Just a second. Is it 70 or 75? Okay, sorry, not 70, 75. Yeah, so dedicate 75% to a capital fund. Number 2, 20% to a reserve fund. That one is more like you are saving it. You give what they call a fund manager. Alim, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
You give a fund manager, Oga, this money, look for where you can invest it. Maybe a hedge fund or a very, very solid investment system where we are sure, 100% sure of returns. Don't use it and gamble. So they are what they call investments platforms where a company can invest. Your profit will not be too much, but your risk is next to zero, one of which is government bonds. The idea is that government cannot go bankrupt. So if a government borrows from you, they will pay, but what they will pay may not be much. Then you now have riskier ventures. You don't carry this kind of money that belongs to a group of people and then invest it in you don't carry this kind of money. Please give room for my daughter Coco. How is your body now? It's okay. Can you fight as you are like this? You cannot fight yet. I used to have one church member. Her stomach is big like this. I never say big like this, pregnant. We used to feel for her. One day after church, I was going, I got to filling station to buy fuel. I saw her almost fighting with her big stomach. Oh. The filling station attendant, she wanted to beat the woman. The woman was running, she was pursuing the woman. I know she was telling the woman, with this, if not for this condition, what I would do to you? And I was like, if with this condition, you want to kill the woman, what if you're not pregnant? And she saw me, and she was so ashamed. She was so ashamed because she never knew I would come there. Let's come back. Coco, sorry about that. I hear you were not feeling well. You have Thursday. Tell all those people that did not come to do their test. I will give them another. Thursday is the last. For that very day, I'm submitting it into a body. If you like, miss. There your hand. What of the other girl? She has not been coming. I didn't see her. I didn't hear from her.
That's me. Is it that me?
I didn't hear from her. I didn't see her. I did not tell Ken to tell Ken whether he said the wife is sick, so I will give him another chance. Thursday. Nothing after that. Have I not tried? Let's come back. So 20% in a reserve fund, like I said, it must be a very solid investment, and then 5% for administrative costs. The reason why the law provided it like that is that if it wasn't provided like that, you hear that they use 80% of the fund for administrative expenditure. Is that not what will have happened? And so we are now saying 70% must be used for capital projects. Administrative operations, only 5%. And it mustn't be 5%. So not more than 5% for administrative costs or special projects, etc. Although at the end of each financial year, so for that 5%, if at the end of the financial year you only use 2% for administrative costs, the remaining 3% put it back to the capital fund for the next year. Are there questions? Are there questions? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
I think the Host Community Development Trust, composition of the Board of Trustees,
Yes.
the law talk about integrity.
Yeah, we'll come to the board. Just
Okay.
wait small. Glory to God. Okay. Good. So the Board of Trustees under Section 245 is to provide a matrix for distribution of the fund to the host communities. That one is a big word, matrix. Matrix basically is a procedure, a strategy. I told you we could have 3 communities, 4. How do you now say there are 4 communities under this trust fund and we have 100 million? This year we can say we are giving 50 million to Kayama because almost all of our production was from Kayama. We just took small from Okokuma and took small from Sampo. There must be a strategy, identifiable and objective strategy that the Board of Trustees must provide. Must use. It is the settlor, sorry, the company. The company is to provide to the Board of Trustees a matrix for the distribution of funds to these communities, and that is what the board will now use to determine how they will share the funds. Okay, let's continue. Let's make some progress before we. So now let's look at the management structure, management matters basically. Let's look at the management structure of this host community fund. So there are basically four basic frameworks. My daughter Coco, we are looking at the legal framework for host communities. Are you hearing? Good. Is the AC too much for you? Are you sure? Good. Okay, we are looking at 4 basic structures. First of all, we have the settlor, or the company that establishes the trust. And then we now have the Board of Trustees. We'll step down a bit to now have what they call a management committee. Step down a bit to now have the advisory committee. I'll take it again. At the apex, we have the settlor, the company. We step down a bit to have the Board of Trustees. Come down a bit to have the management committee. And come down to the barest, we have the advisory committee. So the settlor is the company. I don't need to say much about that. But when we now come to the Board of Trustees, the law also tells us, Section 242, it is the company that sets up this board. They are the ones that will choose who will be in the board. So it's set up by or established by the settlors, who also determines the membership of the board and the criteria for the appointment, subject to the approval of the regulator, the commission or the authority, as the case may be. The board, Section 242, is to be manned by persons of high integrity and professional standing. So 2 things. You must have competence, professional standing. You must have honesty, integrity. So these are the 2 strands upon which you are to be on that committee. Because you can have a good head and a very rotten heart. You can have a very good heart and a very bad head. It means you have honesty and integrity, but there's nothing up here. Buhari, for example, is not a corrupt man. I'll say it forever. But he doesn't know what he's doing. He did not know what he was doing. He did not know what he was doing. So on a large scale, we could say Buhari is largely a honest man, but no capacity. Okay, so another thing I want to point out is that the members of this board may be drawn from the community or from anywhere. You can go to UK and bring members of the board. They don't have to be members of those communities. That is another thing and you need to know. And the set law will determine the procedure for selecting the members of the board, will determine their meetings, will institute or impose financial regulations on them, and will also determine their administrative procedure. Board members that operate for 4 years, they could be elected for another 4 years, maximum of 8. Are you with me? And they will be supported by a secretary. Basically, the secretary will advise them on compliance and will manage their books and all that. What is the role of the board? Section 243. Determine the criteria, process, and proportion of it. So basically, let me just look up at me. For every basic corporate entity, we usually have a board. And that board will comprise largely of non-executives and executives. The non-executives are people who are expected to come and bring to bear experience, oversight, balance, and integrity. These are non-executives. They don't draw salary. They are not paid salary. So it's largely a thankless job. The highest thing they can benefit from is sitting allowances, transport allowance. Are you with me so far? Are you with me so far? They are not staff. They are not employees. The board may meet just twice or thrice in the year. They can meet at the beginning of the year, look at the budget of the entity, and approve the budget. And what they do is to give general oversight and policy formulation. But when we come to the functional day-to-day management, we'll have what they call executives. Are you with me so far? Executives are employees. They go to work every day. They are top management staff. In some instances, they will sit on the board. If an executive sits on the board, we call him an executive director. If he doesn't sit on the board, he is a top executive, but is not a board member. Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
That same concept is brought here, and it's brought, you see it in virtually every corporate setting. A good example is Niger Delta University, which is a corporation. And for Niger Delta University, we have the council. Then we have the management staff. Management staff, I talk about the vice chancellor, and then the registrar, deputy vice chancellor admin, deputy vice chancellor academics, and maybe the library staff, librarian. Those are management staff. Then you now have the council. Council for NDU meets like twice a year. So we have one meeting coming up in December. We had the last one in March. It means it's twice or thrice a year. Council members. So the council is synonymous or similar to the board. Are you with me? Are you with me?
Yes.
Good. So that concept is brought here. So what does the board do? Like I said, determine the criteria, process, and proportion of the fund to be allotted to specific development programs, approve projects for which the fund is to be utilized, provide general oversight of projects, approve the appointment of persons or companies that are to manage the reserve fund, set up the management committees for the trust, and then determine the allocation of funds based on the metrics already provided to them by the set law. Now let's say a few things about the management committee. I said these are basically staff. These are basically people who go to work on a daily basis, and then, even for a corporate entity, like I said, you may have different layers of management. So for example, Niger Delta University now, the deans of the faculties are all management staff, but they are not in the top management layer. The top management layer, like I said, the VC, and then those other people like us. Are you with me? Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Step down a bit, you now have the deans of faculties and directors. Step down a bit, you now have heads of departments. So even a head of department is a management staff to some extent. So Section 247 provides that there should be a management committee for every trust. Is to comprise in this instance of representatives of host communities. Is to comprise of the management committee is to comprise of host communities, representatives of host communities, and then executives. So here the management committee has a mixture again of non-executives and then executives. Are you with me so far? So not all of them are actually employees in this case. Not all of them are day-to-day staff. So every host community represented will have 1 or 2 members in the management committee. They will have executive members who are again to be people of high integrity and professional standing. And again, they need not come from the host communities, appointed again for 4 years, and they will be supported by a secretary and all that. The Board of Trustees is also mandated. So the set law sets up the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees sets up the management committee. They oversee that process. And so the Board of Trustees will determine the selection process, procedure for meetings, financial regulation, administrative procedure, and all that, the remuneration, discipline, qualification, disqualification, suspension, and removal of members of the management committee, and any other matter basically related to them. What are their duties? They prepare the budget. I told you the board approves the budget, but the management committee will prepare the budget and submit it to them for approval. Are you with me so far? They will develop and manage the contracting process for project awards on behalf of the host community development trust, again subject to the approval of the board. They will determine project award winners and contractors to execute projects on behalf of the host community development and trust through a transparent process subject to the approval again of the board. They will supervise the project's execution. They supervise project execution. They will nominate fund managers. We'll talk about that. They will nominate fund managers for appointment by the Board of Trustees. So it's the Board of Trustees that appoint the fund managers. Recently, the Nigerian Authority Regulatory Commission, tomorrow, when we meet on Thursday, we'll talk about what has happened since this act. Is that okay? Is that okay? So today I'm giving you, this is what the act is doing. On Thursday, we'll look at what has happened since. So they will nominate fund managers for the appointment of the board, for appointment by the Board of Trustees, for approval to manage the reserve fund. They will report on the activities of the management committee, contractors and other service providers to the Board of Trustees, and undertake any other function and duty that may be assigned to them by the Board of Trustees to enable the performance of the trust. Thank you, Lord. Okay, now we'll now talk about the advisory committee. Similar system, but here what they do is to advise. Are you with me? And here we're basically looking at people from these communities. So the constitution of the HCDT shall mandate the management committee to require each host community to set up and host community advisory committee. Perhaps I should draw back a bit. When you are setting up, when you are incorporating this entity with the Corporate Affairs Commission, the trust, there must be a rule, a document that will regulate the operation. That document is called the Constitution. If it's a company, it will have called it the Memorandum and Articles of Association. But for this entity that is registered, normally that should be part D or part F or so of the Company Allied Matters Act. Call that document regulating the internal working of the Constitution. And Section 249 is telling us that the Constitution is to mandate the management committee to require each host community to set up this advisory committee. Again, the management committee will now determine the selection process, procedure for meeting, financial regulation, administrative procedures, remuneration, discipline, just like was done for it by the board. The management committee is now doing the same for the advisory committee. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
And the decision of the management committee again shall be subjected to the board for approval. What are their functions? What do they do? The advisory committee, they nominate members to represent those communities on the management committee. They articulate community development projects to be transmitted to the management committee. They monitor and report the progress of projects being executed in the community to the management committee. They advise the committee on activities that may lead to the improvement of security, of infrastructure, enhancement of peace building within the community and the entire area of operation. So basically, they advise, they suggest. Now we there on ground, now we know our people. This is what you will do, and there will be peace. Are you with me so far? Yes. This is so they advise. You have to listen to them. To fail to do so is arrogance on your part. So Section 200 and 50. And anybody who does not listen is a fool. One of the greatest benefits I have in my life is I listen. I listen to my children, I listen to my students, I listen to my wife, I listen to my pastor. I listen. If you cannot listen, nobody can talk to you. You are a fool. You should not marry because you will crash your wife and your children into a ditch. You will not end well. You will make wrong mistakes in life. You should listen. May God help us in Jesus' name. You are a married woman to listen. People should be able to advise you. People older than you, people that know your parents, your children, your friends. Listen. I have this friend, he said he wanted to resign his job. Good job in Scotland. He wants to go into full-time preaching. I said, have you talked to your pastors in Scotland, the church you are going to? Have you shared your vision with them? He said he will not. He just cut the phone off. He will not do what we are doing in Nigeria, blah, blah, blah. He went to resign. For 18 months, he suffered. He suffered. No food to eat in UK. After much hunger, he now went back to do what I was advising him to do. Now he's in Qatar, doing very well. Okay, let's come back. Host community needs assessment. I've already said that before, that even before you set up your plan, you must do a needs and what? Assessment. Section 251. Settlers are required to conduct a needs assessment for the host communities from a social, environmental, and economic perspective. They are to determine the specific needs of each affected community and to ascertain the effect that the proposed operations or projects might have on it, and to provide a strategy for it. So basically, needs assessment, you know what that is. And I told you after that, you now have a plan. In drawing that needs assessment, section 251 says, you must show that you engage with the people. You must show that you engage with the affected host community to understand the issues and needs of each community, number one. Two, you consulted with and you considered the reasonable concerns of women, youth, and community leaders. Why are we saying this? We want your approach to be all-embracing. Is that also? You consult with the major stakeholders in the community. The women they constitute a group. Their concerns will be different from that of the youth. And then you also consider the community leader. And lastly, you must show that you engage with each affected host community in developing a strategy to address the needs and effects identified in each community as the case may be. And I told you after that, you have to draw up a plan. What is the plan to be about? Let me just run through again. Section 251 to 52. The plan must be based on the matrix provided for the matrix. When we talk about matrix, we're talking about the matrix for division of the money, section 245. It must specify the community development initiatives required to respond to the findings and strategy identified in the host community needs assessment. It must determine and specify the projects to implement the specified initiatives. It must provide a detailed timeline for projects. It must determine and prepare the budget of the host community development plan and set out the reasons and objectives of each project as supported by the host community needs assessment. Okay. Okay, so basically that is that. And take your time again and look at it. Now we're almost done. We just have 9 minutes. You have another class, don't you? Lecture is not coming. Okay, but I have something to do. So let's run through taxation and financial matters. Taxation and financial matters. Definitely, if we are setting up this kind of entity and we'll be committing millions, because this 3% for an oil company can run into millions or billions of naira. Are you with me? Yes. So if we are going to give you billions of naira to develop your community, we also want to have some form of accounting from you. We want to have some form of accounting. Every layer must provide accounting. The settlor, the company, must account to the regulator. The board of trustees must account to the settlor. To the settlor. The management committee must account to the board of trustees, and all that. So you have to provide basically audited statements, your account must be audited basically, and in some instances you have to provide annual reports. The annual report is a generalized report of all we did. Then we now have a specific financial and document which is called the accounting financial statements, which must have been audited and all that. So I'll run through what we have here. The financial year first of all, the financial year of the Host Community Development Trust will commence on the 1st day of January and end on the 31st of December of each year, or any other day set for that purpose by the Board of Trustees. So the Board of Trustees can choose any other day. If they don't, by default, they will be looking at January 1st to 31st of December. That is your financial year. Number 2, the constitution of the trust shall also contain provisions requiring the board to keep account of the financial activities of the trust. 2, to appoint auditors to audit the accounts of the trust annually, and just sorry, let me just not getting this line. Section 254. Just a second. Yes, and they also appoint auditors. They must also appoint auditors to audit the accounts of the host communities annually as well. Good. So you see that in section 253, 254. The funds of the trust are you don't tax them. You're a non-profit organization. You know that? Yes, so you don't tax them. Section 256. And payments made by settlers are deductible for tax purposes, section 257. So that 3%, that the settler pays to the host community trust, when they want to pay tax to the government at the end of the taxing period or whatever, they are allowed to make some deductions of their expenses. This money is one of the money they are allowed to deduct. No, now you have made profit of, you sold 100 naira. Government say of this 100 naira, 30% belongs to government as tax. But before you arrive at your profits, you have what they call gross profits. All I sold this year is 100 naira. Then what they call net profits. Before you pay the 100 naira, you are allowed to now deduct your expenses. You understand? I hire accommodation, 20 naira.
Operating costs.
Yeah, operating costs. I pay my staff 15 naira. I do this. I pay 3%, so I pay 3 naira to host community. You deduct all that. After you have finished all the deductions, what you had as gross was 100. What you may now have as net may be 40. It's from this 40 naira now that government will now take 30%. If you don't do your deductions properly, or you don't keep your receipts, all those receipts as you are making those payments, anything you tell government will say you are lying now. No be so? Yes, so. Vicky, is it clear? Good. So they are exempted from tax, and payments made by settlers are deductible for tax purposes. I'm almost done. Okay, so accounts and reports section 255. Please look it up. I've already said a few things about it. So, the management committee submits media reports, and then media reports should not be more than 31st of August. So you submit 2 reports. Management committee will submit 2 reports. First, a media report, and then an annual report, media report, annual report. So 2 reports. For the media report, not later than 31st of August. For the annual report, not later than 28th of February of the next year. The Board of Trustees is on its own now to submit an annual report accompanied with an audited account to the settlor, not later than 31st of March. So the management committee will submit their report, like I said, to the Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees will carry it and prepare their own report that they will submit to the set law, not later than the 31st of March. And the set law will now in return submit another report as well as the audited statements to the commission authority as the case may be, not later than May of the particular year. Just in conclusion, there's what they call sabotage, and this is one of the challenges some people have with this provision. They said section 257, of that 3% we are to give you if your youths, you don't hold your roots, you are not able to rein your people, they go and damage our pipeline, there was community disturbance, they destroyed our flow station, and after all this destruction, we now come and repair, we do clean up, we compensate, and all the expenses we made, we were to give you 100 million, but by the time we did all this expenditure, we have now spent 90 million, it's only 10 million we'll give you. So it's a caution to the host communities to rein in their dogs, attack dogs. The truth is that according to them, 97% of the spillages occurring in the Niger Delta is due to sabotage. If that is true, then that is very bad. Is it true? Yes, that is bad. I was presenting, and last week I told you I was not going to be around because I was doing a presentation. I was doing a training for NNPC staff in Port Harcourt, and they were giving me some information that was mind-boggling, about things. But they are coming from a legal perspective, but they were also giving me industry perspective, just like Abaka is giving me host community perspective. And one of them was telling me an experience he had just 2 weeks ago, where they went to repair some facility somewhere at Akwa Ibom, and the whole village ganged up, attacking them, doing a lot of terrible things. We have to advise ourselves. We are not living in a barbaric age. People come to also work in your community, and they want to do a contract for you. They want to build road. You say they should first pay you. Come in. Yes, 12:30, sir. Okay. They should first pay you before they should repair your home. Meanwhile, they say when they go to North, contractors, when they go to North and they are working, the communities will be bringing food because you are doing road for them. They will bring tuwo. Who knows tuwo? Tuwo.
Grass.
Tuwo, is it grass?
Yes, tuwo is grass.
Tuwo is not grass. Yes.
Yes.
You know it now. Okay, I don't know. Tuwo is a food like corn, rice or corn or something. Rice, very nice food. So as you are working in the north, these people will bring it for the contractors, they will bring food, they are happy, they cheerful. When they come to Niger Delta, on the other hand, or maybe Eastern Nigeria, the reverse is the case. You see hostility, you see violence. It's not to be. We have to talk. This is not how job people used to do in the past. We have to talk to ourselves. I'm talking to you now, community people. Go take this message back to our people. Our people.
Our people are bad now. Mostly the traditional rulers. You start from them. That is the problem.
It's well. Vicky, you take it to Sabama. Coco, take it to Barai. My daughter, take it to Ondo. I think there's oil in Ondo. President, take it to Ekino. Which state is that? No, well, oil will come. Take it to Delta. We have to change. So, when in any year an act of vandalism, sabotage, or other civil unrest occurs that causes damage to petroleum and designated facilities, or disrupts production activities within the host community, the community shall forfeit its entitlement to the extent of the cost of repairs of the damage that resulted from the activity with respect to the provisions of this act within that financial year. The basis for computation of the trust fund in any year shall always exclude the cost of repairs of damaged facilities attributable to any act of vandalism, sabotage, or other civil unrest. That is section 2.5, and that's a serious one. Some people have criticized it that it's a government imposing upon the communities the obligation to secure facilities. That is not our duty. In my village, you came and put pipeline. You are taking my oil. The law has provided that you should give me small thing. Why will you not impose an obligation on me to secure your pipeline. That is the role of security agencies. I'm not trained to do that. And if a few miscreants, because there's nowhere you don't have bad people, so if a few miscreants now go and damage the pipeline, why should the rest of the community suffer? And that is a logical argument. But the other argument is also logical, because whether we like it or not, you will suffer for what your people are doing. So it's your own duty to also rein in your people. Look at what Gaza is going through. Majority of them are peaceful. A few people entered into Israel and killed people. Now everybody is suffering. And most times when you suffer disproportionate to what they are suffering now is disproportionate. Because they say 8,000 people have died. The people they killed 1,400. 8,000 people are still running. The numbers are counting. So whether we like it or not, the law is saying to us, you cannot be separated from your people. So if you have,
Take responsibility.
you must take responsibility. You have town hall meetings, you have youths, you have to be able to have regular discussion and change the orientation. This is what we are expecting. Scholarship, all of them, we want to go school. Women, cottage hospital, this one, that one. If our youths now decide to go and damage pipeline, to go and do civil arrest, seize Oyibo man, do all those bastard things they are doing, all of us will suffer. That is what the law is saying for now. Okay, so just in conclusion, if a company refuses to comply with its host community's obligation, it's a ground for revocation. We looked at it in section 95, 96, and section 238 is also emphasizing it as well. Okay, so positives. Let me just run through positives and issues, and after that we adjourn. What are the positives? We have localized development. Development of those communities is no longer left with Timi Brinseva or Doye Diri or Seriake Dixon. It's no longer left at the realm of the governor and his caprices and whims. We have now localized development. Are you with me? Yes. We have bypassed the governor, we have bypassed the House of Assembly, and we're saying from the oil company directly to the community, and I think that's a good one. Number two, funds are tied to expenditure and not profit. That's another good one. Funds are tied, the payment. We are not saying give us 3% of your profit. You spent 100 million naira last year as your expenditure. From there, compensate us. Don't say, okay, I spend all that money now, but I no profit now. I don't know if you understand. It's not tied to profit. I no profit now. After I spend all that money, in fact, I even lost. So nothing for you. Did not say no. As you are spending that 100 million last year in Ezetu, keep 3% of that 100 million aside. Number two, it has improved on the GMOU model. There were a lot of issues with GMOU issues. GMOU, a lot of issues have been involved. Even my PhD thesis, I talked about it. Lack of transparency, unenforceability. In some instances, we do not even know the criteria the oil companies were using. There were community issues and all that. This one is a bit better because the regulator is involved. Everything is transparent. It will go a long way to address, in addressing the developmental challenges of the region. It has a possibility of improving oil company community relationship, and there is now dispute resolution mechanism. I'll talk about it briefly. Dispute mechanism resolution is now also provided. So instead of everything will go to court, there are now is now possibility. The issues, what are the issues? The concerns we have. How do we determine a host community? We'll look at it when we come on Thursday. Is that okay?
Yes.
Number one issue. How do we determine the host community? Number two, 3%. Is it enough? The question is, how much is enough? 3%, is it enough? And then the question we ask ourselves, how much is enough? Number three, the issue of vandalism. Is the act penalizing host communities for vandalism and sabotage? Fourth question, people have argued that the power of the settlor is too much. And so the question we're asking, should an independent authority rather than the settlor oversee the trusts? Are the powers of the settlor too much? So those are issues I want you to go and then look into. Come here. Oh, thank you for strength. There's something I want to just add before I release you. The regulatory authorities, yes, I did say that. The role of regulatory authorities in this whole business, what is their role? Okay, so let's leave it. When we meet on Thursday, I will start by looking at the role of regulatory authorities. I will now look at what has happened there. No, let me just take it, just one slide. First of all, Section 234, and the regulatory authority, the authority of the commission as the case may be, are mandated to make regulations to guide the development of the trust. And these regulations will, among other things, provide for a grievance remedial mechanism aimed at resolving disputes between settlers and their hosts. Have they done that? We'll look at it on Thursday. The regulations may also authorize the settlers to make adjustments aimed at reducing expenditure where the available funds for the administration of the trust as provided under the section is insufficient to fund ongoing operation. In that regard, for example, so what we are saying here is that the authorities, upstream or downstream, or mission the case may be, will now make regulations, one of which is they may empower the settlor to initiate measures designed to reduce operational expenditure. So, for example, a settlor may reduce the number of members of the board of trustees too much, sort of 50. In view of our financial challenges, we are reducing it to 5. And they used to meet 4 times every year, and these 4 times now we rent hotel for them. No be so? Transport allowance, this one, buffet, blah blah blah. And they used to meet 4 times. We have reduced meetings to twice. So those are all measures that the settlers may be able to initiate. The same with management committee, the same with advisory committee. You can reduce meetings, you can reduce numbers, and all that. The regulators are also required to make regulations to guide and safeguard the utilization of the funds, to guide. And to, of course, when we say to guide and safeguard, is with respect to what? Fraud. The challenge with our country is that with all the initiatives designed to guard and safeguard, fraud still occurs. Because they said banks are not meant to, if anybody wants to transfer more than 5 million, they must notify EFCC. No be so they talk. If you are depositing more than 1 million, that should be a check. Those rules only apply for me and you. Recently, I opened a corporate account. They are worrying me that I should bring one document called SCUMO. I don't bring it to close my account. I should go and get it from EFCC. I said, if you people are worrying me, if you are worrying all the criminals the way you are worrying me, we will not have theft in this country. You know, but the idea is the settlers are to put in place measures to guide and then safeguard, and the regulators are to have oversight responsibility to ensure that projects proposed by the Board of Trustees are implemented. I take one question and we adjourn. Okay, so I see you on Thursday, 10 o'clock. I love you all. On this subject, on this topic,
yeah, related, that is based on the...
Come, let the camera catch your face.
So yeah, based on the first area that we started talking about the ocean and ocean dichotomy.
Yes.
In the case of AG Federation versus AG Abia State and 35 others.
Yes.
Upon the decision of the Supreme Court,
Yes.
that favor, that is the decision favor the federal government. And
Yes.
also, what are the policies of the federal government
Yes.
to assist the oil producing state after the decision of the court?
Is it not what I already said? One is that the federal government immediately initiated the amendment of, or the introduction of onshore-offshore dichotomy. That is what I said, 2004. 2, they set up the Niger Delta Ministry. In 2001, they had enacted a law called the NDDC Act. Is that not so? Yes. Setting up a Niger Delta Development Commission to help us. So these are measures. And now we now have those community development systems. Is that not your question?
It's my point of order. I'm going to look it from the perspective. That offshore and offshore dichotomy. Is it an advantage to the oil producing
Yes.
company or to the district? Because it's not divided by the district.
No, sir. The law, that decision said there is a dichotomy. That is what the Supreme Court held in 2001. There is a dichotomy between onshore and offshore. The boundary of a state, the boundary of a littoral state is the low what? Low water mark. And so, please shift. If it is the low water mark, Bayelsa ends, this is where Bayelsa ends. This is the low water mark. 12 nautical miles is the what? Territorial sea. Is that not so? Coco, are you with me? Then we now go forward a bit, 24, 12 more. We have the contiguous zone where we can execute our laws. The breaking of our laws in this place or in this place, we can still execute it here. Then we now start talking about the EEZ, and in some instances, this land may elongate into the water. Where it does, we now talk about the continental shelf. International law says there is a dichotomy between Bayelsa and here. And if there is such a dichotomy, any oil gotten from here is not paid to Bayelsa, it's paid to Abuja, federal government of Nigeria. That is the decision. So Bayelsa should not put eye here. When you talk about derivation, move your eye here. All the money here, and all of us will share. That is our ground.
The low water mark.
Yes.
Is it the coastline in that area?
Yes, now. The coastline. We have this tide. I told you the other day.
Like my.
You have it in your village?
Yes.
Is it salt water?
Sort of.
Is it too?
Yes.
I didn't know that. The Kremo is fresh.
Emo, we have some parts.
In some part, like the blabbering part is Amatu is fresh water.
But in
The
the
salt
Kremo
water, salt water.
Gongon, the Kremo Gongon is
No,
fresh.
it can never go away with fresh water.
Fresh. Okay, so normally in these salt water areas, we need to have this low water mark.
No, no.
Yes. So this is the high water mark, this is the low water mark. This is the low water mark. So this is where your space starts. And so from here, Ogado put your eye. All of us will share them. Bayelsa is saying, all year, give me 13%. So
But
since,
now that the act is talking about the littoral communities,
yes,
it means that those companies that are operating offshore under the continental shelf,
yes,
they are going to acknowledge those communities
yes,
that are very close.
that's what the act is saying. For purpose of host community, any petroleum you get from here, 3% of your expenditure paid to this host littoral community. So those are all measures.
We fear that the act will enslave a lot of us.
How?
That is the fear we have in that.
Please come to the camera, let's capture it. We want to get host community perspective. He is a grassroots man. So his concerns is good that we capture them. Yes, let's hear you.
We have this fear
Okay.
that by the virtue of the GMOU,
Yes.
GMOU from before now has been child.
Yes.
And we discovered that a lot of funds have been misappropriated
Okay.
in the GMOU in conjunction with the oil companies,
Mm.
in conjunction with some of their staffs.
Yes.
And now the same settlers is going to monitor the processing alongside with some person.
Mm.
Like if I want to use my case as a case study,
Don't call any name.
Oh, yes. About 500 million naira was used as a community fund from GMOU to establish hostel in Niger Delta University.
Okay.
In Niger Delta University. And the group of persons went and partnered with a South African company to build the hostel in Amashuma. Until today, the hostels were not built, and almost 500 million plus 100 million naira was mismanaged. Today, nobody knows the whereabouts of that money. And the same set of people,
Yes.
that was why I'm asking about integrity.
Yes. Yes.
Can integrity prove?
No.
So,
It's a big challenge.
is it now?
Yeah.
And the same set of person, like the as soon as this act has been implemented, was signed to law,
Yes.
so the same group of persons have been interested, and I think some of them are nominated for the BOTs.
Wow.
So we think that if that large amount of money is coming to the community, most of us will be enslaved. We will be enslaved.
Let us continue
So it's a
to
major concern to us as well.
let us continue to hope for the best.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for that perspective. Any observations, President? How was this class? Was it beneficial?
Yes, sir.
Did you learn any new thing? Good. So we call it a day.
Thank you, sir.
Love you all.
Sir,
Yes, brother.
can I have slide number 6?
Why not?